Welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program, Assemblyman Mike Norris. Mike Norris represents the 144th Assembly District in New York State, a district that includes Erie, Niagara, and Orleans counties. We thank you folks all across Western New York for tuning in. Mike Norris, nice to see you.
Mike, it's great to see you too.
A lot going on here at the state capitol right now. We're knee-deep in budget talks. We're going to be finding out what your priorities are, what you're paying special attention to as this all unfolds here in Albany. A change in the way New York State develops energy sites and the different types of energy that come to fruition here in New York. So there's a lot going on. But we're going to start today with another criminal justice issue. This one's called the Green Light Bill. This was the bill that allowed driver's licenses to be given out to illegal aliens in this state, people who do not have citizenship papers. And it seems to be developing now into a couple of other issues along the way. It's become more than just that. It has strained, certainly, the relationship between state government and the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. I opposed the Green Light Bill last year when we debated the issue. Quite frankly, I don't believe that unlawful citizens who are here unlawfully should receive driver's license. It's a privilege to be here in the United States, and it's a privilege to make sure you have a driver's license. And that should only be afforded to those who are here lawfully. All right, with that being put aside, though, last week when I was in Albany, we received a briefing from Homeland Security officials, and in particular, 2 agents from the Buffalo area, which is very, very important to me as I represent the Buffalo-Niagara region in Western New York. And we heard from these nonpartisan, professional individuals who have worked in the federal government for both administrations, Democrats, Republicans, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. These are nonpartisan people. And when we listened to the concerns about this Green Light Bill in particular, it really sent a chill up my spine. When you go to the border right now, since this was implemented, the border agents do not have access to our New York State DMV database, registrations of vehicles, registrations of licenses, and so on and so forth. This is a serious concern because when these individuals approach the agents, this is a critical piece of information that they need to make sure they can pass into our nation, first of all, safely, and to protect our national interests and our national security. So this vital information they currently do not have. And it puts them at risk, as well as the general public, because if they slip through and then these people are out about in our community, it endangers the public. Now, we heard that last Monday. Since then, there has been some slight movement between the federal government and the governor in terms of coming up with some common sense solutions to ensure that this database will be available to our agents at the border. We're not there yet, but I know that the governor has made some concessions in this, recognizing that Homeland Security is at risk and that he is working to find a solution. I think it's very, very important that this is done because our border, listen, in Buffalo-Niagara alone, we have 3 bridges right there, 4 if you include the Peace Bridge, and we also have the ports, and everyone coming in through our ports, through our waterway system. Very, very important that this information is made available to our federal agents to protect all of us. And, some of these concerns were raised last year during the debate. So anyways, I'm working hard on this because it is important to my constituents, for example, for their Nexus passes to be able to get those. And we are pushing the governor to make sure that we get a solution to this problem.
And 2 things. I mean, anybody who watches any of those reality cop shows on TV knows how important the DMV database is to law enforcement, right? The first thing a police officer will ask you for is your driver's license. And then wasn't it this governor who a few months ago thought it was very important that anybody who had a registered vehicle have a new license plate on it, that they were going to have to pay Why? Because some of the old license plates were kind of fading and chipping and peeling, and how important it was for police to be able to read those license plates. So how do you rationalize not giving police officers, or whether it's state or federal or local, that information?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a genesis of the information. To have the, right as soon as they pull you over, you're at the border, to know who you are.
That's
and
all.
Why are you coming? And if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? I don't have any problem with that, particularly at the border when we're on the front line, particularly in the Buffalo-Niagara region, with our 4 bridges, our ports, and our access by water to the rest of the nation. Very, very important, and I'm glad that the governor is starting to move in the direction of coming up with a compromise to ensure that our public safety, our border agents, and the general public are protected.
That's right. Now on to the budget talks that are going on here at the state capitol. A month or so ago, we heard from the governor his priorities. The legislature has held hearings now on the governor's budget proposal, heard from the department heads. So now it's down to nitty-gritty. People are meeting in rooms, and it's all very, advanced, the talks right now. What are you listening to in particular? What's important to you as this budget plays out in 2020?
Representing Western New York, it's all about priorities, in my opinion. Now, when you look at your household budget, you look at priorities, right? What are you going to spend your dollars on? Do you want to improve your house? Do you improve your roof? Whatever the case may be. Business the same way. What are your goals? What are your objectives within the budget? I look at the state budget, though it is so massive. It's $176 billion right now, projected to be close to $180 billion in this next year's budget. But I look at what are the priorities for the people of Western New York. And sadly, because of the downstate-driven majorities and the emphasis on Long Island and on New York City, I think our priorities are continuing to be left behind. I'm going to give you an example. The highway superintendents are going to be here this week, and they're going to lobby for additional CHIPS funding. What that is it is some state dollars which go back to local municipalities to help fix our bridges and our roads and our culverts, a critical aspect. CHIPS funding has remained flat over the last 10 years. That means there's no cost of living adjustments, there's no additional dollars being placed in there, and we know that the cost of materials have gone up. We know that with the weather being hot and cold, our potholes are getting worse. This needs attention, and I believe strongly that we need to make sure that we protect our infrastructure as a number one priority other than public safety for our citizens here in New York State. So I'm going to be with them at a rally this week and continue to push for not just a restoration of our CHIPS funding, but also for increased dollars going into our roads and into our bridges. Secondly, in terms of winter recovery money, the governor did remove $65 million last year. I'm a member of the Transportation Committee, which I'm very proud to serve on. But he removed it out of this year's budget. I'm working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure those dollars are put in there as well. Speaking of other priorities, our libraries. I meet with many of our librarians, and again, in the governor's proposed budget, he reduced general library funding by $5 million. All the libraries across New York State, $96 million to $91 million. Now, that is a lot of money, but in comparison to $176 billion, that's just a pebble in the pond. We need additional dollars for our libraries. They are still serving as a major hub for us, in particular with our students to learn early on how to read, how to use the new digital technology, and also in terms of digitalization. Let's take a look at broadband, for example. That's a whole other issue. But in my area, there's a lack of broadband right now in our rural communities. The libraries serve as a key hub to making sure that everyone has access to broadband and a critical part. So I'm calling for a full restoration and additional dollars in that as well. Also, in terms of the construction funding for libraries, a lot of our libraries need assistance with the brick and mortars. For example, in Lockport Library, the elevator was replaced through a construction grant, or will be replaced through the construction grant through the state budget. He cut the $20 million for construction funding right out of this year's proposed budget. They need to be restored as well. And in terms of our veterans, my grandfather was a World War II veteran. I really believe strongly that we have to do everything we can to assist our veterans as they come back into society. And the governor, in his proposed budget, cut the Joseph P. Dwyer program of $6.7 million, which helps those individuals for peer counseling to come back into our society. It's a critical program, and he slashed that out. So in terms of priorities, I believe that we need to invest more dollars into our infrastructure, into our libraries, and into our education system, because this is the basis of us going forward decades from now. And on the flip side of the aisle, listen, we need to make sure we look at cuts, particularly within the Medicaid area where they are warranted. Fraud, for example, duplication of services, consolidation of services. These things need to be really attacked because we're spending $76 billion of the $176 billion in Medicaid funding. And I also believe that needs to be all relooked at as well. Be fair to direct care workers compared to the amount of dollars that fast food workers are getting, for example. Now, I think it's important that they also get a fair wage, but at the same time, lower than those who are helping the most vulnerable. That needs to be examined as well. And also in terms of Medicaid, very quickly, should we be drug testing those who are receiving Medicaid recipients, able-bodied people? Should we be putting a residency requirement on in terms of Medicaid? Maybe you have to live in New York State for 3 or 6 months or even a year before you get these services. Day one, you come onto New York State soil, you get Medicaid benefits. These things have to be examined because when you examine Florida and Texas, and you look at their budgets combined don't equal New York State, and they have just as many problems in Florida and Texas as we do here in New York.
Got to find cuts somewhere, right? Because you're going into this with like a $6 billion budget deficit between revenues and spending.
Yeah, and we have to look at the spending side. I mean, no one likes to do it. You don't like to do it in your house. You don't like to do it in your business. But the reality of it is we have lost 1 million people in the state of New York since 2010. And it's because of the high cost of taxes and the high cost of doing business here in New York, not because of the weather. Our families are here, we're rooted here, but people are leaving with their feet because they cannot afford to live here because of the taxes. And we have to do a better job of re-examining our state budget and the priorities within that state budget, both on to make investments long term, but also the necessary cuts so we can sustain this budget going forward.
All politics is local. That's the old saw, right? There's nothing more local than a pothole out in front of your house or that's there every day on your commute between home and work. So when you were talking, that's what all I could think about as you were talking about transportation monies and the need to have good roads. You need to have good roads because a lot of traffic, a lot of goods still move on the roads, right?
The goods move on our roads. Our children going to school. We're going to
the most
work
important goods of all.
Exactly.
Right.
So you think about this. I mean, when you get up in the morning, a former city clerk told me this in the city of Lockport when I was an intern there many years ago. The first thing that you do is you go to the bathroom and you brush your teeth in the morning, right? And that's because we need good water and we need good sewer apparatus and our pipes and our infrastructure to go. Next thing you do after you eat, you go on the road, typically to work. Most people in my neck of the woods go. These are the basics. We need to get back to the basics. We need to put our monies into strong infrastructure because this is the future for business and for our economy. When businesses come to our area, they look at our infrastructure and can they sustain the infrastructure here. So it's important. I'm going to continue to fight for this, not just in this year's budget, but hopefully in budgets in the future as well.
We're going to keep up with you as this budget negotiation plays out. And if you folks want to know how to reach out to your representative, easy thing for you to do. You can get a hold of Mike Norris by sending him an email, norrism@nyassembly.gov, or you can call the Clarence office at 839-4691. That's in the 716-839-4691. Mike Norris, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike.
Always a pleasure. Thank you folks, too, for spending your time. We'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Update.